Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyshynski of the Connection Newspapers. Alongside me, Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers. And tonight, we're, of course, coming to you live from the studios on tape in beautiful Merrifield, Virginia, where we are steps away from the multiplex cinema, where Brokeback Mountain is playing at this point. And Jeff and I will actually be doing some of the scenes from Brokeback Mountain and sort of a dramatic reading, if you will, later in the show if you stick around.
Hopefully it's just a reading. Right?
Just a reading. Just a reading. Golden Globe, though.
That and Walk the Line.
What do you if you had to wager, and I know you're not a betting man necessarily, but if you had to wager on the best picture right now, the top choice at the Oscars, you go Brokeback Mountain, you go Walk the Line.
I think it's going to be Brokeback Mountain. I mean, it seems like that was the dramatic winner. Walk the Line was the musical kind of winner, and I know people I've seen that movie. Certainly liked it. I haven't seen Brokeback Mountain. But I would guess that would probably be the favorite right now.
You think so?
I would.
I think that you, my friend, are sleeping on a little thing I like to call racing stripes.
Oh.
It was about a talking zebra who raced.
Ah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. Because I remember the year that Braveheart won.
It's right.
And you said Babe the talking pig.
This is all right. Just to clue you in, this is an old debate. The year that Braveheart won the Oscar for Best Picture was the year that Babe the Talking Pig was up for an Oscar as well. And I have said to this day that Babe was robbed. That is a classic movie. Not saying Braveheart isn't. Classic. It's magical. Talking pig.
I haven't even seen it, so
exactly. So who are you?
I guess I am a little biased.
But you do eat bacon, so.
Good. I love bacon.
There you have it. Before we get going, I want to thank the folks that make this show possible every week. We're, of course, talking about the underwriters, including our good friends at CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. And Quality Care Ford Service Center, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. Of course, as you can probably see, we are two, whereas most weeks we are three. Our good friend BJ Cooper Rules of the Connection Newspapers couldn't be here this evening. There was unfortunately a death in the extended family. Want to send out our condolences to his extended family and to him as well, and hopefully everything is okay over there.
Going to be heading up the turnpike.
Exactly, up to NJ. So we'll miss him tonight, but we will forge ahead because we have a lot to talk about this evening here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Beginning with a topic that I know both you and I are very, very passionate about, and that, of course, is the Redskins losing to the Seattle Seahawks last weekend to end their storybook season. Now, not taking anything away from them, it was a very impressive thing to make the playoffs, to get to that point, to go to Seattle and be in that game. That said, I think there's a certain amount of, shall we say, excusing the fact that they could have won that game. I think a lot of the reports about that game, a lot of the reaction to that game from the media over the weekend was, hey, let's give them a check mark. Let's give them a gold star for effort. You know what I mean? And it wasn't the fact that here we had the MVP of the National Football League going out in the first quarter. You had almost every break in that game going to the Redskins, and they couldn't pull it out.
They had Seattle had 3 turnovers in the game, and normally in the playoffs, if you can somehow come out ahead on the turnover battle, a lot of times you come out the victor. And it was a sloppy track out there in Seattle. It rained 27, 28 straight days out there. So it was shaping up to be quite a defensive battle, and that's the thing that's carried the Redskins so far. Through their I guess it was a 6-game winning streak, was their defense.
Right.
And they were coming up with big plays and holding teams down. And here they didn't have to go up against Alexander. And Hasselbeck looked to be on the ropes early, but he really came through in the end. And the Redskins, as far as they went, the offense really never showed up, big in a way that you could say that this was a Super Bowl caliber team.
Right, and like we said, the pass that Moss caught in the end zone, the pass to Cooley where the defense broke down, these things started to set up. And there was a point where in the fourth quarter, I think it was, where you're watching that game and you're saying to yourself, well, it's destiny they're going to win this game. I mean, they're getting every break in the world in this game. And I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't pull it out, to be honest with you, because it seemed like everything was setting up for it to be sort of another storybook win for the Redskins, where their offense really doesn't do much. The defense makes a play here and there. And I was surprised that they didn't win that game based on what was happening in that game. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination they were the better team. I think the better team did win that game. So I think in the end you look at this season, if you're a Redskin fan, and you do identify some needs. You definitely need to get yourself another receiver. I think you need to figure out exactly what you're going to do with Arrington. And whether or not there's an equitable financial decision you can come to that might, either keep him here or get him out of town. And then next year you come back and you've got some momentum and you see where it takes you.
And then, and there's some other positions. Kicker, for instance. John Hall missed a very makeable field goal in that game that would have cut it to 4 points, and I think kind of let steam out of their balloon a little bit, in there. And then the quarterback position. Brunell looked, he was a little banged up, and I know he kind of struggled in the past few games. But when do you go to Jason Campbell? We figure that Ramsey's going to be somewhere else next year, but when do you kind of make that decision from, we got to get Campbell, a first-round pick, we can't sit him on the bench forever. When do we put him in, and when is Brunell's time done? And
I think the other thing to figure out when it comes to Campbell is Gibbs' timetable. Here you have a coach who, I don't think there would be any fan that would have been shocked if they did say win the Super Bowl this year, if this was it. I think he's here to win. And maybe he's here for 1 more year, maybe he's here for 2 more years. How long does he go in this situation, and how does that dictate then when Campbell finally gets his shot? Because you figure, you look at Parcells in Dallas. He's riding that veteran quarterback bandwagon as long as he can go.
Absolutely.
And I figure Gibbs is going to do the same thing here, because although he drafted Campbell, I always figured that was because that was someone he thought could help the franchise maybe post-Gibbs versus helping them win with him here.
And we certainly know Greg Williams, is an assistant coach who's destined to be the Redskins head coach. They paid him more than, I think triple what some head coaches are making just to stick around and with the notion that he's going to be the head coach. So whether that's, 1 more season or 2 more seasons, I definitely think Williams is going to be the head guy soon, and maybe Campbell's going to be starting his career, with him. There
you go. Well, you mentioned kickers before. One kicker that might be on the market is Mike Vanderjagt, who obviously missed a pretty big field goal for the Colts. Now, don't want to dwell too much on Indianapolis-Pittsburgh. I think there's been a lot said about this game. I think this game has been pretty well broken down, and just as broken down as the Colts offensive line was.
Certainly.
But I think you're someone who spent a lot of attention on the Colts this year. You know the team a little bit. And what do you think went wrong?
Well, as Peyton Manning in his press conference pointed out after the game, he didn't want to be hard. He wanted to be a good teammate, but he did address the offensive line, and I think he's got a point. This is an offensive line who the past 4 or 5 years has been known to protect the passer. They're always around, 10 or 15 sacks allowed. I think this year it was about 20, and that's very good.
Right.
And in this game, there were times with Peyton. He was just under attack by 3 or 4 guys, and a lot of times when teams are going to blitz, one guy's going to get free, and you maybe have to chase around. But there were times where he was just dead to rights, on Pittsburgh's defense. So, I know he brought it up after the fact, and their GM today, basically said the offensive line was a problem. It wasn't Peyton. So whether the layoff contributed to that, I don't know. It certainly looked like there was a little bit of lack of focus there on the offensive line. I know that, right before halftime they had a chance to score a touchdown. They were on the 2-yard line with a 3rd down, and a guy gets a false start penalty.
Right.
And there were some physical breakdowns. They just looked like they were getting manhandled out there. So
now he's not here to defend himself, but I do feel as though at this point we should float the Kubarulas Colts theory, which is that they should have played their starters for the last 3 weeks of the season for the entire game. They should have just had him in there. They shouldn't have rested anybody, because that broke up the rhythm. Never mind the fact they were off for a week between the end of the season and this game against Pittsburgh, but that's what threw him out of the rhythm. I think you and I both respectfully disagree with him in that regard. I think that you run the risk of getting somebody hurt.
The way BJ was talking made it sound like they didn't play at all for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Let's not forget that they pretty much played a full game against San Diego, and this was a type of game that reminded you of the San Diego game, where the defense was really harassing Manning, and the offense was able to stay on the field and do enough to win the game. So whether they got too much rest, who knows? But I didn't think we were going to be making that excuse against a team that looked like it was a Super Bowl shoo-in.
Exactly.
Too much time. That's just an excuse.
And I think the bottom line is that everybody's been talking about the Colts offensive line. Of course, there is another team lining up against that offensive line, and time and time again, Pittsburgh's defense seems to come up with these efforts where they are absolutely tenacious, where they make plays. Sometimes the plays they make get overturned by an invisible man in the sky who decides by watching his television that an interception is not an interception. But that's okay.
And this is, I mean, let's not forget, New England found ways to shut down that offense.
Right.
They did it by pressing the receivers and playing real physical defense. So it's not like this hasn't happened before.
Exactly.
Pittsburgh did their homework and it worked out for them.
Exactly. And speaking of the Colts offense, of course, the other big news coming out of that game was the fact that Peyton Manning, his team was beaten by the bus, and then he decided to throw his offensive line under one. What do you think about that? I mean, he comes out, he basically places all the blame on his teammates. Like you said, the general manager comes out today in radio, sports radio in New York to kind of say, hey, it's not Peyton's fault. Doesn't he have to take some of the blame, though? I mean, right now, this guy is Dan Marino. This guy is a guy who can't win the big game when he gets to a certain point in the postseason.
I mean, it's true that he hasn't won, but it's hard to also say what questions he was being asked in the press conference. I mean, did people say, what was it back there? Was it just you not being able to find someone, and I guess he was just being honest. I mean, it looked like he was rattled and rushed a little bit. He's always been known as a quarterback that sort of has happy feet back there, but he's always able to overcome it. This game he wasn't, and maybe honest. I mean, honesty. After games when people are frustrated and hurt, that's a lot of times when you get like the best answers, and and maybe they didn't have a chance to think it out. But I mean, he was being honest, and it was a valid point. Whether he would have said that a day after the game, probably not.
And that's the tricky part, is that he's right. I mean, you look at that game, and the offensive line was like tissue paper. Mm-hmm. The question is, though, as the leader of a football team, as the guy that everybody counts on, whether or not it's your place to call out people publicly when you're not going to be in another game for several months. I mean, maybe if this was the regular season, you're doing it to motivate them for the following week. Right. You go ahead and do it. But I think what this comes back to, though, is the difference between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Tom Brady puts his offensive line in the credit card commercial. Peyton Manning calls out his offensive line and basically said, "Hey, you lost the game for us." It's the little differences between guys that win and guys that don't.
And it's probably easier to do it now since 3 or 4 of those guys probably won't be with the team.
Pretty much.
Year if they're gonna look at replacing him and upgrading.
Nor should they be. I mean, that was pathetic.
Yeah.
Exactly. You and I could have stood there. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe just me. All right. Let's get on the high school beat for a second after we've gotten all the football out of our system. Let's talk about girls basketball for a second. We are now in the home stretch of the district schedule for the Patriot, Concord, Liberty, and National. Right now we are seeing the teams that clearly have separated themselves from the pack, and then some teams that maybe in these last 6-7 games could really make a push to make some things happen in the postseason. Let's start off with West Springfield over in the Patriot District. Last night they lost a game in overtime, 36-34 at TC Williams. Tiara Ruffin-Pratt, who's sort of the freshman sensation, the Sidney Crosby, if you will, of the girls basketball scene, she only scored 10 points, had the crucial free throws in overtime to win the game. So what you come out of this game knowing is that defensively, West Springfield was able to control a player who has blown up against some people in the northern region. But offensively, they were only able to manage 34 points against the TC Williams team that clearly is going to be their main competition in the district. TC 7-0, Springfield 6-1. And can you read anything from this game?
I don't know. I don't necessarily from this game, but I think as we've seen through the first half, we're seeing some low-scoring games out of some of these top teams. I know when Westfield beat West Springfield during December, it was a 20-17 game. That's the final score, Greg, not the halftime. And Westfield's been winning games in the 30s and 40s. I went to a Westfield Robinson game, 2 of the better teams in the Concord. That was a 30-30 game going into overtime, and they didn't even score in the first overtime. So the fact that some of these teams are winning low, that's great. But I think you're gonna see the teams that can actually avoid these long droughts, scoring wise. Those are the teams that are going to be going on.
Absolutely.
In the playoffs.
Absolutely. And you look at the way the Patriot District is breaking down right now. Annandale right now is number 3 in the district. Lee is a team that I would have my eye on if I were you in the postseason. They are a collection of sophomores and freshmen. Rudy Cofield's a coach who's been waiting sort of for this season, next season, the season after, for this collection of young players to kind of mature together, kind of find some cohesion. Right now, they're playing great basketball. They're 4-3 in the district. They've played some impressive games, even in their losses. And if this team continues to mature, they could be a real player, I think, come playoff time.
Yeah, and you got some notable teams there. Lake Braddock, 3-4.
Yeah.
A little under what we're used to for them. And Hayfield, a team that's done well in the past, and then South County has a win in district over I'm assuming 0-7 West Potomac.
And South County is the frustrating one because South County has a core of players that played for Hayfield last year. They didn't get Lauren Robinson, who was ruled ineligible, and that really left a huge hole in that lineup. I saw them play against Hayfield, and where she would have been this sort of two-way force, they just don't have that kind of dynamic player. They have Brittany Carlock, who's scoring a ton of points. Lauren Reinshuttle is the second offensive option. She's playing pretty well, but without that one other dynamic player, they just seem to be off their game a little bit.
And I guess it's hurting Hayfield. They lost all those players,
absolutely.
but all the players actually didn't get in on the South Lakes or South County's roster.
Yeah, something.
South. They're heading south.
Liberty District, Madison and Marshall, both 6-1 atop the district right now. WT Woodson right behind them. You had Madison winning a game against Woodson last night, and that's a district right now where you can clearly see three teams separating themselves from the pack.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be the case for a lot of the teams in other districts. I know, when you look at the Concord district, Oakton seems to be on a class by itself,
right,
almost in the region, you might say, and then Robinson, Westfield, Chantilly is up there, and Centerville. But as far as the Liberty, I know Woodson didn't have a great out of district record, but they're playing well in district. So I mean, those are the three teams I would expect to see move on in the region. And in Madison, they've been up there the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So certainly expect them to do well.
What kind of impact do you think Stonebridge might have in that district come playoff time?
They're a team that should be able to get into the region tournament. They should be able to be one of the top 4 teams there. Whether they're able to knock off one of those top dogs, not sure. I think all their wins have come against the teams seated lower than them, and they're a team that is a good basketball team. I don't know if they're up to the level of the teams above them. So they could be playing right where they're at right now. 8-5 team, so they should be seated where they are.
National District, no surprise. Edison 6-0 atop the district. Mount Vernon is right now in second at 5-1. Edison, I think our friends at the Washington Post have them ranked number 2 in the DC area right now, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, Dorena Campbell doing her thing with them. There's a lot of other teams that are sort of in that middle mix there. Wakefield, W&L, Yorktown. Then you have Stort and Falls Church kind of bringing up the rear, but clearly Edison's the class.
Edison and Mount Vernon.
They're going to come out of that district and they're going to roll through it.
And it's good to see Dorena Campbell. I mean, they're doing the same thing they did last year, whereas hopefully this year Dorena Campbell can stay healthy and make an impact. Because I mean, between Campbell and Jasmine Thomas over at Oakton and then the new freshman over at T.C. Williams. I mean, there's potentially some really good matchups there.
And then the Concord district you mentioned, Westfield kind of doing their thing with the sort of stalling, sort of low-scoring games. Oakton, the class of the district. Robinson is an interesting case. That their first year in the Concord, they're 4-2, played a very tight game against Westfield. And I talked to Coach T.J. Dade this week for a sort of a mid-district notebook that we put together for the connection. And clearly he knows that you want to finish 1 or 2 in that district. You don't necessarily want to have to play Centerville or Herndon in a first-round tournament game in the Concord district because, those are dangerous teams. Mm-hmm. Fairfax is 0-7.
Right.
They really haven't challenged anybody at all this year. I think the number 2 seed has a pretty clear shot to advance, let's say, unless something crazy happens.
Right.
But the number 3 seed might have a bit of a tougher game.
Yeah, and talking to most coaches, nobody wants to finish below 4 because that means you're on the road.
Right.
And there's potential for a number of teams to move up. I mean, Centerville right now is 2-4, but they played Oakton last night to within 13 points. And even though 13 points may sound like a lot, that's probably one of the better efforts against Oakton.
Right.
And Centerville just beat Chantilly, which has a pretty good overall record, but 2-4 in the district, and they've lost 3 in a row. So there's a lot of chance to kind of move up. I was pretty impressed with Robinson when they played Westfield to that close game early on. So it's going to be interesting to see how that district finalizes itself.
And obviously everybody who is anybody in the northern region is trying to get themselves to the Patriot Center. In fact, we found out a couple of folks that will be attending an event at the Patriot Center in the near future. We are, of course, talking about the return, for the second time, of boxing to the Patriot Center. Jimmy Lang, the Bishop O'Connell grad, who is a Great Falls native and won his first bout at the Patriot Center against
Perry Ballard.
Perry Ballard.
It was an impressive win.
Very impressive. That was back in September. Well, Lang is back at the Patriots Center, back in his old haunts, and hoping for a big crowd to see him fight a gentleman by the name of Joey Gilbert. Joey Gilbert and Jimmy Lang were both on NBC's The Contender. I know I was a big fan. I don't know if you ever watched the show.
I didn't, but I wish I had.
Well, I know. Lauren Trainer, our esteemed floor person here on the show, is a huge fan. I know that. But it was a lot of fun, that show. Anyway, the story is that Joey knocked off Jimmy.
In a kind of an upset.
In an upset. But again, the whole point of the show was it was made for TV boxing. It was 3 rounds.
Right.
So in 3 rounds, it's sort of a
9 minutes.
It's a gimmick. It's a gimmick match. So he kind of toughed it out and knocked out Jimmy Lang out of the competition, which I know really upset NBC. So now they get their rematch at the Patriots Center, and the Fairfax Sports Report was lucky enough to be part of the big old press conference that was held at Champs over in Fair Oaks. And let's take a look at the pre-fight hype, as it were, for Lang Gilbert, the rematch.
We're excited and anxious to announce the return of boxing to the Patriots Center on Saturday, February 18th, with a fight card that promises to be bigger, better, and even more electrifying than the first. Both of our main event participants were 2 of the most popular boxers on the TV show The Contender, for good reason. They became stars overnight. Both men have seized on the opportunity and now prepared to take that next step toward reaching elite status in the boxing world. Looking to redeem himself in his hometown against Joey Gilbert, the man who eliminated him from the Contender competition, welcome World Boxing Empire, junior middleweight champion and Northern Virginia's own, Jimmy Lang.
To say that this loss haunts me is an understatement. Not a day goes by that I don't hope and wish for a rematch and another shot at Joey. He's been gracious enough to give me that shot, and you're going to see a different Jimmy Lang out there. It's going to be a much different fight. It's going to be I don't know if it's going to be a war or not. I don't know how long he can hang in there, but I'm going to outbox him, beat him up, break him down, and knock him out. That's it.
He's a 3-time NCAA champion, 4-time regional champion, a 4-time All-American, and Nevada State Golden Gloves super middleweight champion. His underdog status, athletic skills, and strong character guided him during the Contender Series. Here to prove that his Contender win over Jimmy Lang was not an upset, welcome Joey Gilbert.
And this is going to be a great fight. I don't know how, I don't know what round or what punch, but there's no doubt in my mind I will win this fight. And I just wish, the best of both of them. We have great families, great support group. I would never want to see anything bad happen to Jimmy. I only wish the best for him and his family. I'm just ready to give this town a great fight and send everybody with a good moment. So thank you.
I know you didn't see the best of me. I'm going to assume that you didn't see the best of Joey. So, this is a 12-round fight. You got to train for, obviously 5 rounds is shorter, so train a little more duration, but I'm going to be ready to go 12. I'm going to be ready to box for 12, and if he leaves early, fine. If not, he'll just box him for 12 rounds and beat him every round. He's always been on my mind, in the back of my mind. I train for whoever I'm fighting. With the Contender, you went in there, you were training for 16 guys, 15 guys. This is nice because, Joey Gilbert, 100%, I'm training for Joey Gilbert. He's on my mind 24 hours a day, and that's the way I prefer to have camp. I mean, they kind of threw us up in the air and just saw where we landed in the Contender.
There aren't many people on the show that, I can say I identified with. There's probably a few guys on the show I wouldn't have given a rematch to, but I think Jimmy, he's always been respectful. He might not have liked the loss, but he's always been a gentleman about it. And the opportunity arose. I got a phone call, same as him, asked if I'd be willing to go 12 rounds with Jimmy Lang in his hometown. And I'm a real fighter. And that's what you got to do sometimes. So I'm here, and I'm going to land my ship on these shores, and I'm going to burn them. There's no way out.
Well, that was enlightening. Something about ships setting sail or landing or what have you.
Burning.
Did you ever notice how much Jimmy Lang's father looks like Gene Hackman?
Oh, really? Because I thought that was Norman Dale from Hoosiers.
Oh, you see,
And that the guy in the suit was Jimmy Chitwood.
Oh, really? Because I thought that Lex
Jimmy
Luthor had made the fight. That's what I thought.
We'll have to ask.
I was looking for Ned Beatty. I didn't find
We'll
him.
have to look for him at the fight in
February.
February.
Yeah, there it is. Who is your pick?
Well, Jimmy Lang looked impressive against Perry Ballard, but who knows? I mean, this guy's coming in as kind of an unknown. He's already beat him once, so.
Well, yeah.
I think it should be a closer fight than the last one for sure.
See, to me, that whole fight with on the Contender, if I remember it correctly, because it's been a while, was Joey Gilbert was more gutsy. He really kind of gutted out the win. I think, and I think the contention was that Jimmy Lang's a better technical fighter. So I think if you get him for 12 rounds, that's like 4 times a Contender fight.
It's hard to gut out a 3-rounder. I mean, you're barely breaking a sweat.
Well, I don't know. Have you ever fought for 3 rounds?
No.
No, you see. Exactly. How would you know? You don't. All right.
I don't know.
I'll tell you who broke a sweat this past weekend. I am Captain Segway tonight. Mike Spooner of West Springfield High School, who ran in the Montgomery Invitational, ran in the mile run against his arch rival, Brad Saragusa of Chantilly. We say arch rival, they're friends, but they race each other, and usually the races are quite exciting. In fact, in the Virginia AAA Cross Country Championship in the fall, Saragusa got the best of Spooner, and Spooner was very discouraged after that.
I mean, this is a rivalry that Spooner has generally won. Like you said, won in the region, but then Saragusa won at states. And this was a race that was really close. It was 0.2 of a second.
Exactly.
So Spooner was leading most of the race, and then Saragusa came on late, overtook him in the last 150 meters, and then Spooner edged him at the tape. So
Spooner
it
was kind of interesting because the way they traditionally run, Spooner is the kid who kind of comes out quick. Saragusa is the kid who rallies. So Saragusa did rally, and then Spooner rallies again, which is nuts. And then literally shoulder to shoulder coming across the finish line.
It's interesting to see. I mean, because in cross country, obviously, it's a longer race, so Saragusa obviously has to make his move sooner.
Right.
So maybe in the mile where it's not as long, Spooner has enough to keep up with him. And he said in the article, hey, I'm going to go with him and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then he was able to stay in front.
So it should be interesting when we get to the regional level where we expect these two young gentlemen will meet again in competition to see who wins that round. Because right now, I guess you give Saragusa the cross country title. Spooner comes back, wins this race up in PG County, and then we'll see who takes the next round between these two. They're great races. Every time these guys hit the course, it's just fantastic drama because these two guys know each other really well. You know exactly where they're going to be on the course. They got a radar for each other.
A lot of strategy going into these races.
It's good stuff. Impossible trivia time, Jeff Graham. Impossible trivia. Would you like me to go first? This is the part of the show where typically we ask each other, and when BJ's here, all 3 of us ask each other, a question that we consider to be quite challenging about the world of sports or sports history. Do you want me to hit me?
Why don't you go ahead? I almost got it last week,
Okay.
so why don't you go ahead and ask me again?
There's a show on cable, and I don't know the name of it nor the channel it's on, but it's about cheaters. And one of the best cheaters that I know is Rosie Ruiz, who, of course, faked having run the Boston Marathon and having won the Boston Marathon. And her fraud was later exposed when it became apparent that she hadn't broken a sweat. She didn't know what splits were. And no one could account for where she was on the course. Now,
Did she get in a car and then they drove most of the way?
Subway, shortcuts, that sort of thing.
Well, if you eat a lot of Subway, you're going to be in good shape.
Thank you.
You mean the train?
The train. Okay. Now, my impossible trivia question for you, Jeff Graham. When it became apparent that none of the video cameras filming the event had captured Ruiz running the Boston Marathon, what was her excuse for her not showing up on those television cameras? I know, impossible.
Did she just
impossible trivia.
Did she run too fast?
That's a good one. That's even a better answer than what she said. She said, this is amazing. She said that what happened was, since she had short hair, obviously people mistook her for a male competitor. And she was actually in all the shots. They just couldn't pick her out because her hair was so short.
Wow.
But yours is good. She ran too fast, like the Flash.
Like Flash.
Right.
I don't know if I know any males named Rosie.
No, Rosie Greer.
I guess you do.
Well, what's your question? Do you have one?
It is, and it's related to the National Hockey League. Our New Jersey Devils are certainly doing
Surging
well.
ahead, absolutely.
Winners of 7 straight.
7 straight.
But this doesn't have to do with the New Jersey Devils.
Okay, I might not get it then, but go ahead.
In the regular season,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
what player once scored 10 points in a game?
In the regular season,
In
what
the
player?
regular season.
All right, I'm going to probably guess Mario Lemieux.
It wasn't Mario
Or
Lemieux.
who was it then?
Daryl Sittler.
Daryl Sittler.
Daryl Sittler, who once, I believe, had a son named Ryan Sittler,
I'm sure.
who never made it to the NHL.
No, probably not.
But Daryl Sittler, kind of a name from the unknown.
Did you get that off a cocktail napkin? Just be
No,
honest.
I got it off of Internet Explorer.
Fair
maybe,
enough.
Maybe it's false.
Well,
I
you
don't
stumped
know.
me, and I stumped you. Of course, yours was more of a traditional trivia question. Mine was more
That's right.
of petty knowledge.
Kind of intuition. and I
Intuition.
didn't get it.
Your guess was good, though. I'll give you that. You know, here in the northern region, there are a number of rivalries, and these rivalries do tend to show themselves, I think, a little bit more in basketball season than in other seasons. You know, you got your South Lakes Herndon rivalry, and these things kind of sometimes spill over into the stands. Now, the reason I wanted to kind of bring this up with you on the show is in covering the game over in Arlington, a game between Wakefield and Yorktown, they allowed the fans to kind of sit with each other and intermingle. And a game I went to last night, Madison and Woodson boys game, kind of heated. You had the separation of fans. My question to you is first, just a two-part question. Do the fans take these things too seriously? Do they take their influence from college basketball with the Cameron crazies and stuff like that, and does it get a little rowdy? Or do you think the intensity is warranted considering how intense these on-court rivalries, the Herndon and South Lakes, the Marshall-Madison, other teams like that, considering how intense they are?
Well, being that I've covered a bunch of games in my time, it seems like it's kind of a different atmosphere in high school because in certain gyms you tend to be a little closer to the benches, and even the court of the court of play. I've seen games where kids have gone diving for balls out of bounds, and you end up in the enemy territory, in,
Right,
in the first row of seats, and words can be exchanged, and I'm certain that high schoolers, when the emotions get flowing, they're maybe not as cordial as maybe college fans would be, or maybe NBA fans, but I think you're starting to see schools take some steps to get rid of that. I know at a couple games I've been to this year, they've asked fans not to sit in the first row, of seats, to maybe separate it a little bit. But I certainly like seeing games where the crowd's involved. I went to a Chantilly Oakton game a couple weeks back, and these are two teams that didn't have winning records, and it was a Tuesday, so you don't expect a whole lot of people to show up. I got there 20 minutes early, and I had to park in back of the school, and I've never had to do that before. and I get in there, and the crowd was rocking and rolling. It was a good atmosphere. So good to get involved, but kids have to kind of know their place. They can't be getting involved with the players on the court.
Exactly.
Or with coaches even. I've seen that before. So
Yeah, and that's the sort of line I think that most of the administrators and the folks that are there to kind of contain the crowd draw. You can get rowdy, you can chant, you can cheer, you can shake your keys and tell them to go home at the end of the game. But the minute you target a player, the minute you target a coach, the minute your passion for the game kind of gets focused in, let's call it a negative direction.
Right.
That's when folks kind of step in and say, okay, hey, let's all calm it down. Maybe they get one of the boys in blue to yank one of the kids out of the stands and give them a talking to, that sort of thing. So I do think that there is a line that can be crossed. Sometimes it's crossed, sometimes it's not. But I will say that I've been impressed this season with the leeway that some of the administrators have given these student sections in expressing their passion.
Sure, a lot of times you'll get the head nod or the little point, but rarely you're ever seeing the 80s getting in a kid's face,
Right.
Unless it's repeated or maybe it's against an official and you're hearing some words. I know I've heard a couple times this year where a kid's been thrown out of a game. Or a fan's been thrown out of the game because they've gone overboard. But it's kind of interesting to see certain contests I go to. They point out the little sportsmanship creed before,
Right.
and they say we will treat everyone with, respect and blah, 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 and that. And rarely do you ever see, kids behaving, like that. And so it's almost kind of like, should that sportsmanship creed ever even be mentioned, or, should
Well,
there
it
be?
can't hurt.
Yeah.
It can't hurt. I mean, I don't know if it does much, but it can't hurt.
I don't think it does
No,
much.
I don't think so either, but
But
can't hurt. National District Boys. We're going to break down some of the district action here in the northern region as we get down the stretch, heading towards the district tournaments in boys basketball. In the National District, Mount Vernon, E.J. Dawson's team, clearly he has played great, and they are undefeated right now in the district. Edison and Wakefield are both vying for second place. I've seen Wakefield play. They took a bad loss last night, actually, to the rival WNL, but they're a quality team. They've got a couple of really good, dependable players. I just don't know if they have the same kind of depth they've had in years past to make a run this year.
right, WNL had 10 losses going into that one, so kind of a bad loss, but
Surprising, yeah.
yeah, I mean Mount Vernon 5-0 right now, so it looks like could they be a runaway, and it's kind of a battle for second place. It's kind of early to see, and we see some teams struggling. Falls Church 0-5, Yorktown and Stewart both with 2 wins. So maybe you're going to get a kind of a 500 team getting into the region tournament. Should be an interesting district there.
Absolutely.
You're going to have a 4-5 game that's going to mean a whole lot.
Absolutely. And then moving over to the Concord District. I'm sorry, the Patriot District. I was getting ahead of myself there because I'm talking about Scotty Reynolds. Patriot District boys, T.C. Williams right now is 7-0. They took care of Hayfield, and they are in the lead in that district. Hayfield 6-1, Braddock 5-2, and then you've got Springfield, Annandale, West Potomac, and then Lee and South County really kind of bringing up the rear right now. TC on top, Hayfield second. That's been the story for years in the Patriot, and right now, I'd have to say that Hayfield is sort of the interesting team of the two because they had so much adversity at the beginning of the season. They've righted the ship. They have the pieces in place, and I'd be very interested to see what they do in round 2 against the Titans.
Hayfield, I mean 6-1. I don't think people thought they were going to be that strong after what happened in the beginning of the season. TC, we thought that they could be the team that could take over that district. Now that Hayfield's fallen back a little bit, but like Braddock certainly has been playing well. They won that Christmas tournament, the Hubert Davis tournament over Westfield, who's playing real well over in the Concord, and West Springfield. I mean they put a hurting on Chantilly earlier this year. It was like a 38-point win or something like that. Chantilly, always a pretty good team over in the Concord. So Patriot really competitive. I wouldn't count Braddock or Springfield out of that race.
Not at all, especially in the postseason. I think Hayfield. The one thing I would look for them in the second half of the district schedule, and talking to Coach Abella this week, right now they've got a kid by the name of Evan Eo, who we've mentioned on the show before. He was the quarterback of the Hayfield football team in the fall. He's now basically the starting power forward in that team. Mike Davis, the big center, he's been able to play well, but they're not getting enough rebounding from Davis. And it seems like Eo is going into Tuesday night's game, Eo was 4 rebounds away from being the leading rebounder in that team. And they're looking for more active defensive post play from Davis. I imagine they'll get it from him in the second half of this district schedule. But right now, Abella has said that this team would not be where it is right now if it wasn't for Eo. And Eo is a kid who I think more people consider him to be sort of a football player than a basketball player. It took him some time to kind of get those basketball skills back after football season. But he has come in and made a real difference. He's a really athletic kid. And right when they needed him to kind of come in and fill in for Antonio Heyman after Heyman left the program, Eo's come in and really made a difference.
Hayfield's a team that, as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 years ago, with when you had Mike Lee and the kids, they were a perimeter-oriented team. Last couple of years, they've really been dominant in the post, and that's what's really been their strength and has carried them as far as they've wanted to go. I know Freeman and Woodhouse, a couple years ago, they got them into the state tournament, and last year they did really well. And when they've struggled, it's been a team that's been able to shut those kids down.
Right.
So,
right.
Like we said, Hayfield 6-1 at this point.
There you go. Concord District, the Scotty Reynolds Show, continues 6-0. Dropped another pretty large amount of points on the Fairfax Rebels last night. Herndon is 6-0, Westfield 5-1, and then you've got some separation to Fairfax and Chantilly, Centerville, Oak, and Robinson kind of bringing up the rear. Herndon is Herndon, and I don't think that there is a team in that district that's going to beat them in the regular season.
If they play as well as they've been playing, they will not get beat. They should not get beat. And they're a team that has sometimes struggled in the playoffs against lesser teams when they've had great squads. But I think playing that out-of-district schedule against some of those nationally rated teams is really going to help them. Westfield, I think, right now, obviously the second best team in that district. They've only lost a couple games. Played well on the road. They've beaten Hayfield. They've beaten Woodson. They've beaten South Lakes. So those are some pretty good out-of-district wins. And Fairfax is a team I would probably bet would be the third best team in that district. They've had some injuries. I know you notice about, but if they get healthy, they're going to be a team to watch.
Well, their most key injury happened before the season, losing Joey Shoemaker to injury, which really hurt them. But Joey Lynch-Fleur was a guy. Their main post player had a bit of a stomach illness last week. He's still kind of recovering from that. Jordan Gibson, who came over in the offseason, has been a huge impact player for them and has been their leading scorer on most nights. When those two kids are healthy, when they're going, the Fairfax Rebels are a very, very dangerous team, especially when you consider they have what I think is vital for any team to win in the postseason, which is a great post player. And there are going to be teams that the Rebels match up against in the Northern Region Tournament that aren't going to have a player that caliber, who will be hurt. I mean, you look at a team like Woodson last night, who I saw against Madison. Woodson is an incredibly talented team, but they were unable to really kind of match up well with what Madison had in the post. If you're a team like Madison, if you're a team like Fairfax, and you do have a dominant post player, especially on the defensive side of the floor, you're going to be able to win a lot of postseason games just based on that matchup difference, I think.
Right, and in the region tournament, you're probably not going to be able to go 2 games in a row without, you're going to line up against somebody who has a good post player. There's enough teams in this district. I think, the top teams, you see with, you got Madison, they've got strong posts. South Lakes with Julian Vaughn. Hernan, Danny Jones has been playing really well. So Fairfax, I think, is a team that's primed to play good in the postseason.
Exactly, and we should mention Robinson right now. They're 1-5 in the district. This is their first year in the Concord district. Obviously, they're going to take their lumps in that district based on the fact that they're a program that's still sort of rebuilding. I should say that Matt McKeag, though, has that team playing very well. There's a kid by the name of John Ennis on that team who's been a very steady player defensively and has started to shoot a little bit more from the outside. He had 20 points last Friday night against Fairfax. And then you also have a scorer by the name of Ryan McPherson, who's been a steady presence on that team for quite a while, and he's averaging about 14 points a game for them. So Robinson is a team that I think should be able to kind of climb up those standings a little bit in the second half of the season if they continue to play well defensively, if they continue to play hard for McKeag. I think they might have a chance to overtake either Oakton or Centerville to move up into sort of a 4-5 game.
And Centerville picked up their first win of the year in the district over Oakton last night, and they have some decent players. Quantrell Simmons is a real nice forward for them. I believe had 11 blocks, or I think Malachi Jackson had 11 blocks in a game against Westfield earlier this year, and Simmons had a 20 rebound game in December. So, I mean, Centerville's another team that could play well, but maybe just doesn't have enough pieces to move up the ladder.
But again, it's sort of the same situation you see on the girls' side in the Concord district, where you kind of assume, just like you assume Oakton's going to be the top team on the girls' side, you assume that Scotty Reynolds and Gary Hall's Herndon team is going to be the top team out of the regular season in the Concord district, which means that if you are Centerville, Oakton, Robinson, you're doing whatever you can to get out of that last spot, so you don't wind up having to play someone like Westfield in the first round, which probably means you'll be going home instead of heading over into the regional tournament.
Whereas there's seems to be sure things at number one. I mean, what happens below that, I wouldn't be surprised to really see any team pull off an upset there, or maybe a 3 or 4 team to lose early on.
Mm-hmm. Over in the Liberty District, we've seen some pretty competitive basketball this year. I like I said, was able to watch Madison and Woodson last night over in Vienna, and I got to say I was really impressed with Madison. They're a team that has a lot of athleticism. They're a team that really seems to have a sense of an identity almost, in the sense that they've been able to come out and play great defense and then have that sort of feed everything else they do. In the first quarter against Woodson last night, they gave up 18 points to the Cavaliers, and Coach Chris Kublank kind of told me that's completely out of character for them. They like to come out and play smothering defense against whomever they play. And last night, after the first quarter, they played that kind of defense. You have a guy like Warden Edney, you have a guy like Oglu, Brandon Altman in the middle. He's a big 6'8", 6'9" kid who's able to really kind of change things with his shot blocking ability. He had about 5 or 6 blocks last night and about 15 or 14 rebounds last night. So they definitely have the talent on the defensive end, and they have some quickness at guard too. Offensively, Edney's an interesting kid. He puts on a heck of a show, first of all. He had some dunks last night that were clearly of a better quality than a lot of the people you're going to see in this region can put on. But for me, the thing that I wonder about Edney is, and I've seen him a couple times, is when you get to that postseason, when you get to that regional tournament semifinal or the final, and you need that bucket, whether or not he's going to be able to, we know he can clear out, but whether he's that guy to take it from one end, bring it down, run the offense. If you need a guy to be sort of that Iverson, Jordan kind of control the whole game for a couple of possessions kind of guy, whether he's that guy.
Right. I was talking with Pat Deegan, Westfield's girls coach, yesterday, and he said generally in the postseason you see scoring go down, you see scoring degrees. So it's these teams that can play good defense and that won't really get out of character, offensively. The teams that normally do well, have a game plan and can execute it. A lot of times offensively, in the postseason, you get nervous. You think, I'm going to try to take a guy one-on-one, and we got to score that way. Well, that really doesn't get it done. Madison's a team that seems like they have 3 players that can take control of a game at any time. So I certainly expect to see them in the region semifinals. If they don't get that far, it should be a disappointment, and they could definitely be in the region finals.
They're a very, very talented team. BJ has been sort of singing their praises for a while. He actually thinks that they're going to be a regional finalist, probably against Herndon, he believes. I'm starting to become a believer. They are a very good team, and if they play the kind of defense they showed they could play last night, boy, they're going to be real tough to beat.
But let's not forget of a team that's right behind them, Southlake.
Yeah.
Southlake is a team that always plays better in the playoffs than they do in the regular season, and they're usually one of the better regular season teams.
Roy Williams' favorite team.
Yeah, Julian Vaughn was getting scouted last week. Roy Williams, the coach at UNC Chapel Hill, was out there taking a look. Kind of disappointed a little bit. Only had 11 points, but you had to know he was going to be a little bit nervous. But Southlake has great size on the inside. It's going to be dependent, I think, on what their perimeter players do. So another one of these teams with forwards that can play. So that could be a theme in this postseason. What forwards step up for teams? Yeah,
you just revealed a lot about yourself right there, by the way. The fact that you didn't go to an ACC school because you refer to it as UNC Chapel Hill, and meanwhile a guy from Maryland like myself would refer to those Tar-Heeled you-know-whats. But anyway, Woodson is a team that I will not count out. Like I said, they do have a sort of deficiency in the post, I think, but their guard play, guys like Jeff Byer, Zach Wilmot. These are players that take a lot of pride in that program, that got a lot of experience on the team that went undefeated through the regular season last year. And they really played some of the best basketball I've seen in that first quarter. Madison kind of responded, and then Woodson didn't have an answer for that. But Steve Silverthorne, the point guard in that team, he is going to be a kid you need to watch because he has one of the quickest first steps I've seen in the region and has an ability to really change the tempo just by himself. And I'm not going to count out Woodson in that district either. Marshall's the team that's right in the mix. They've got a great coach and some pretty good talent this year. And then you have a little bit of separation down to Langley, McLean, Stonebridge, and Jefferson in that district.
Stonebridge has a kid, Brent McDaniel, who's I think scored 49 points in his last 2 games and 9 3-pointers. But coming up to AAA, they're struggling a little bit, 2-5 in the district, and Jefferson 0-7, still looking for their first win. Don't know if they're going to get it.
And I'm sure we're going to have a surprise or two in the postseason, but you look at the standings right now, and I don't think that it would be too much of a stretch to say that the top 4 teams in the district right now, Madison, Southlake, Woodson, Marshall, will be your regional representatives from the Liberty District.
Right. In boys and girls side, you could probably pick 8 teams that could get to the final 8 on each side, and you'd probably get 6 or 7 right.
There you go.
Like you said, there always is an upset.
Well, there you go. Well, there's your high school sports. Let's get back to the pros for a second. Let me ask you something. You and I are both Mets fans. I think we've been quite open and honest about that. We are not Washington Nationals fans, but we do have an affinity for that franchise and would like to see it do well, but not better than the Mets. Sammy Sosa is a guy who people are saying could come to the Washington Nationals. If you were a Nats fan, Would you want him on your team?
Absolutely not.
Why not? He's Sammy Sosa.
Yeah, he's Sammy. So do you want Henry Aaron on your team when he's 60 years old? No, because he can't hit. Your game is Sosa's game is broken down over the last couple of years. I was glad the Mets didn't get him last year. I'm saying the Nats don't need him now. The players that they have there, even though they're not well known, guys like Ryan Church can certainly fill in and play better than I think Sosa. Sosa just doesn't seem like he has a lot left. Didn't seem like he had a lot for Baltimore last year, and playing in one of the biggest ballparks in the league, not a home run hitter's park. I don't think his game fits for Washington.
I think people were enamored with the idea of Sosa last year for the Nationals because they all felt as though the team didn't really have a draw, didn't really have someone to bring the fans in. Well, first of all, the fans came anyway, and second of all, now you got Soriano on the team, who I don't necessarily think is a huge gate, but he's going to have some, at least for one season, but he's going to have some flashy stats. I mean, he might get some people out to the ballpark to go along with the people that are already on the team.
I mean, here's a guy that's not very big, but he can hit it as far as any second baseman can. If he plays second base for the Nats, that is. I know they want to move to the outfield.
But the point about Sosa is that you don't need the unicorn at the circus anymore.
Right.
People are going to come see the Nats regardless.
If it was 2 years ago and he still had a little bit left, certainly. But I mean, I'd almost say go get Piazza before you get Sosa.
Right.
And I don't know if I'd want Piazza on the team.
But the good thing about Sosa coming to D.C. is that in D.C. you are so close to Virginia wine country that's like an endless amount of corks.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. Cork board.
So, all right, boy, point-counterpoint time between myself and Mr. Graham as we head down the home stretch here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Issue number one, the Super Bowl. Are we allowed to call it the Super Bowl? I mean, I don't know. I don't think we have any sponsorship deals with the NFL. Do we have to refer to it as the big game at the end, like all the potato chip companies?
Big Sunday game.
All right, big Sunday game. We'll call it the Super Bowl. Okay, the Super Bowl is coming up. The AFC and NFC title games are this weekend. I have my opinion about what I think the best matchup is. Jeff has his. Mr. Graham, what do you think the Super Bowl should be this year and why?
I'd like to see Pittsburgh and Carolina. My fiance's from Seattle, so she's probably going to kill me after the show. But I mean, here's two defensive coaches. Cowher with his big jaw, and John Fox, who's coaching Carolina, is a real energetic guy. So I mean, I'd like to see them just kind of match wits. But we're not talking about all defense either. Steve Smith, who probably is making a an MVP campaign right now in the playoffs as far as what he's done. He's had two great games against the Giants and the Bears, and for Pittsburgh you have a defense that just knocked off probably the best offensive team. So a lot of interesting storylines I think you see. But like you said, Seattle I think would be a good matchup as well. Why don't you tell us about that?
You and I agree about one thing, and
we don't want to see Denver.
We don't want to see Denver is like drinking NyQuil watching The English Patient. You don't want to see Denver in the Super Bowl because who cares about Denver? There's nothing. The only thing compelling about Denver is the fact that Jake Plummer looks like he just stepped off the set of That 70s Show. And that's it.
There's no more Mile High Salute. When they went to the Super Bowls earlier, they were getting crushed. They don't have John Elway anymore.
No John Elway.
Like they said, not a real personality of that.
But I would like to see Seattle. I would like to see Seattle because they've never won. I know Carolina's never won either, but Seattle's really never won. They've stunk.
They've never been.
Exactly, they've never been. I think you have two really kind of cool, compelling players in Hasselbeck and Alexander, and I think a Pittsburgh-Seattle Super Bowl, for a myriad of reasons, has the best storylines, the best thing, the Alexander thing, the Hasselbeck thing, the Cowher thing. I just think
Roethlisberger's beard.
Roethlisberger, exactly, and what a tackler, huh?
That's
exactly. I know, game saver, right? All right. Moving on. Instant replay. Well, we decided, we put this on the docket, but evidently I think we both kind of like it, right?
I like it when the referees don't go to it and then get it wrong.
Right.
It seemed pretty clear last week that there were some calls that instant replay, should have confirmed or maybe overturned, and somehow the referees didn't see it the way that 99% of the national audience did. I
think the problem with instant replay is, like you said, it's the abuse of it. Yeah. There's simply no way. There's no way that there's a camera somewhere in that stadium that is going to have an angle that's going to show where the ball should be spotted better than like 6 guys standing around the play. That's impossible.
Right.
And
a lot of times now you're seeing a lot of 3 and outs, so you're getting a lot of commercials, and then you come back and there's one play, and it's challenged. So you go to another commercial and they come back, and then the team punts and you go to the game is slowing down just a little bit.
Exactly.
Lately.
And that's why I think every time they go to a replay, instead of showing the thing 50 times and showing the referee looking in his little thing there, show old Bud Bowl commercials.
Put
Wouldn't
Bud
that be
Bowl
great?
217
Bud Bowl
on there.
2000, and then you have the little beer bottles fighting
Have
each
the Bud
other.
Bowl playoffs, because there's certainly enough beers out there now.
Exactly.
To get
Oh,
involved.
I would never lay money on Amstel Light. Tony Dungy, I happen to think that it is time for the Indianapolis Colts to make a change and get rid of Tony Dungy.
His playoff record is not the best. I think it's 5-8.
Yeah?
It's either overall or with Indy. So I mean, there's some credence to that. Maybe the guy just does not get it done in the playoffs. I think the problem lies elsewhere, and I certainly can't blame him for what happened at the end of the season with his son. But
Yeah, well,
maybe a couple more years, maybe so.
That's the thing. I mean, you kind of feel a little heartless.
Yeah,
saying
Greg,
that-
can't fire the guy after his
yeah,
son
I know.
dies.
It's
Great
like
argument.
saying the Saints should move. You can't. You're in a lose-lose here because of what happened. But from a purely football standpoint, taking the emotion out of it, there are certain teams in every sport that get to a certain point, and then you need to change the coach to get over the hump. You look at the Bulls. Doug Collins got them to a certain point. Phil Jackson brought them to the promised land. There are a lot of teams like that. I mean, the Patriots are like that to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
So maybe you get on the horn and say, hey, Dick Vermeil, you know a thing or two about a thing or two. Why don't you come coach the Colts for a year before you retire?
And then you win a Super Bowl, you start crying.
You start crying.
And and you're set for life.
Right, there you go. So I happen to think that Dungy is a great coach in the regular season. And then maybe you won't get the playoffs. Maybe he coaches the regular season and gets somebody else to coach the playoffs.
I mean, he coached 13 games this year and had to turn it over. And
There you go.
Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. All right, there's the point, counterpoint. As usual, a heated exchange. Ooh.
I believe I swept that.
I think
that
you're
category.
3-0. Okay. Thanks for let's remind everybody what's coming up here on the Fairfax Sports Network. Talking, of course, about the FSN Game of the Week. Boys basketball, Madison at Marshall, Saturday at 11 a.m., Sunday 8 p.m., Cox, Comcast, Verizon Channel 10, and FSN on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Please enjoy the fun and games there. Email us if you get a chance. And I want to thank the folks that make it possible every week to do this show. CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. And Quality Care Ford Service Center, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. All right, Jeff, another fantastic show in the books and another great weekend of football ahead. And hopefully the games are as good as they were last week.
A couple weeks away, Super Bowl matchups.
From the Big Bowl.
The Big Bowl.
The Big Bowl. Hey, thanks for watching the Fairfax Sports Report. Stay classy, San Diego.
And hurry back, BJ.
And hurry back, BJ. Absolutely. And the least they can do is give us some water. If it's just two people, a jug of water to keep the palate.
A little parched right now.
Little parched. Lights, little hot. Absolutely. Thanks for watching, everybody.